All right, guys. So today on the podcast, I'm excited to introduce one of my friends that I've known for almost 2 decades, Jenn Pinkerton of Pinkerton Psychotherapy in Houston, Texas. We're just going to jump into it with her about all the things, spouse relationships, friend relationships, and really just trying to be your authentic self and knowing how to have the tools to show up that way in your relationships.
Yeah. So hope you enjoy it.
It's a fun one.
Hey. Hi.
I'm Lauren.
And I'm Alex.
And we're 2 friends who moved out of the big city to see what the small town life was all about.
We're passionate about health, wellness, relationships, and the entrepreneurial spirit.
Listen in weekly to hear all the wild details.
This is That's Wild.
All right. Welcome back to That's Wild, everyone. We are so excited to have a longtime friend of mine actually on the podcast who has kind of pivoted in life, often in life in many different facets, and just is probably one of the most, when I talk about Jennifer Pinkerton, I usually tell people that as a very young 20-year-old, she was one of my mentors in my work life, in business. And just to watch you over the years in your family life, in your business, in your writing, all the things that you've done, you're very inspiring, and you really have that je ne sais quoi about you where people want to know more about you. And I feel like you're always cheering people on and have always been so authentically Jenn. And so we're so excited to have her on. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And that introduction was so amazing. I appreciate that.
Okay. So Jenn, first talk to us. When I met you, oh my gosh, it was 2006. We were both working at a title company in Houston. Isn't that crazy? I think back at that, I'm like, that's almost 20 years. That's wild.
Yes, I definitely, I remember that. I remember our meeting and I remember our great connection that we had. So I love being able to still know you all these 2 decades, I guess, later.
I know. No. And I think even though we've moved on and we pivoted in careers and life and, family life and all kinds of things, we've always still kind of kept in touch. I was telling Alex, even when I was doing health coaching, you would be like, can you help me work out in my gym? Can you help me use this equipment? Help me know what to eat. I'm just like, I love that about Jenn is that no matter what she does, she always goes, if she wants something, she's going to make that happen, honey. And I love that. So tell us a little bit about how you got into this space. You've always been great with words and you have always been great as a connector and really kind of diving into the why behind why we do things and relationships and stuff like that. But how did you get into opening this psychotherapy practice? Or I guess not practice, but
It is a practice. I'll tell you that, I've always been a writer, as you're saying. I've always had this love with rhetoric and the love with the idea of being introspective about life and introspective about people. The human condition is something that interests me greatly. And so I wrote about that for many years, and I started really increasing my level of interest and focus in it. So much so to the point where I decided that I wanted to go back and finish my master's and have my master's really be oriented in psychology because I'm so interested in why we do the things we do, why we get stuck in patterns, why we repeat things that we shouldn't be repeating, why we aren't thriving in the most amazing versions of ourselves. And when I went back to school, I recognized that I loved holding space for other people. And it wasn't just about me getting the validity and credibility and knowledge to excel as a writer. It was about, I actually want to help individual people as well. And so it kind of shifted for me. And so I got my master's in marriage and family therapy and got my license to practice as a licensed marriage and family therapist associate here in the state of Texas. And I'm also a doctoral candidate right now with my PhD in clinical sexology.
Oh,
so
awesome.
I do a lot of relationship work, and I'll be Dr. Pinkerton soon. But my focus really where I feel like, thank you, where I feel like thriving, where I feel like I can help people thrive, and I feel like it's the sweet spot for me, is to help people understand in their relationships, what's preventing them from showing up in the best way? What's preventing them from feeling really connected? I tout myself as a connection expert because that's where everything is centered around. And when we can learn how to truly connect with other people in our lives, whether it is mostly in a romantic relationship, but also in work and with our friendships and with our children and with family members, when we learn to not allow things to hold us back, we can learn how to heal from those issues and things and emotional trauma that maybe has been a barrier for us to be who we really are, our authentic selves. When we can tackle those things and heal from those things, then we learn all these new skills, all these new mechanisms and ways to have that conversation with ourselves, to have the compassion for ourselves that we need, so that we can recognize it also in others, and we can show that and share that. And so that's really what it centers around. And the sexology part of it is, of course, from an intimate standpoint in our romantic relationships, things that we have and we hold back that we have issues with can also affect that. So it's all really at this cohesive, group of things that I feel like when you can address that in therapy or in coaching, or even from just your own self-help interest to do so, it can make such a big transformative difference in your life. Does that answer your question?
Do you think you could explain to us? Because I was asking Lauren, though, what exactly is a psychotherapist? Can you explain that to us?
Especially in a relationship to psychologists, psychiatrists, psychotherapists.
All these words, there's a lot of interchangeable words. There's a lot of interchangeable words in here. Basically, my focus is marriage and family therapy, meaning that I have a systemic view. I look at the entire family unit and how family experiences, your primary caregiver experiences, those love lessons that you have when you're a child, how they affect you as an adult. So that's the systemic lens that marriage and family therapy comes from. Psychotherapy really encompasses all of that. So it encompasses whether you're a marriage and family therapist associate, whether you're a social worker, whether you are a licensed professional counselor. All those things fall under the umbrella of psychotherapy. It has tenets of psychology, the basic knowledge of psychology as well. But when you get your master's, you focus on the specific aspect that really drives where you want to help people and the interest you have. So psychotherapy is that work and that study and knowledge and expertise of the brain and the mind and how it affects you, the neuroscience of that. And then you have your own lens that you look from, whether it's systemic, whether it's more future-based. It depends on your focus of studies. My focus of studies uses an attachment lens, looking at how we were raised, what life experiences we had, how things shaped us, how we determined who we are today, and being able to recognize that we completely may not be able to change the life we had growing up, even if our parents did the absolute very best they could with what they had. Sometimes there's things that affected us, and we don't have to look at that and say we're going to operate from that way as an adult now. We can't change what happened to us, but we can absolutely change what we become, and the future is ours to have. And so the lens I operate from is that, in psychotherapy, we can do a deep dive. We can do some work, inner child work. We can do some work to figure out our own patterns, our usually maladaptive coping skills that we've developed, the parts that we had that are there to protect us and how they can get in the way. So it's a lot of work to understand I'm not being the version of me I want to be. I'm not being my true, authentic, amazing self, and why. And so then we look at why, and then we heal the why. And then that's when transformation can set in.
I love that. So and especially on this podcast, we talk about this a lot, and I don't know your feeling about this, but we're very motivated by learning like the why behind why we do stuff. We're very into the Enneagram over here.
Sure.
And a big part of it is because, and I think at least it's kind of a dumbed down way for us to kind of understand a little bit of that childhood stuff. Like I'm a 3, I'm an achiever, but I didn't know that I was until I literally did a podcast and she listened and she was like, I thought I was a 1 because I have this constant inner critic and all the, and she was like, oh my God, you said like a million times on that podcast, but I could be successful at that and I could make more money than so-and-so and I can
achieve. And I was like, you're a 3. I don't know what you're talking about.
But it was kind of like the opening point. So I went back to like my, mother-daughter relationship and started going like, oh my gosh, that is the only way I felt like I got love there. And I don't think that was her intention, but it was, and so how can we, I guess this is my question talking about that, is that people probably don't think they have these childhood wounds, right? Like they probably think like, I had a great childhood. So how do you dive into that? And what does it take for somebody to really grasp that and learn from it?
Well, if I can quote one of another professional in my industry, I love Terry Real. He talks about that if you show me the thumbprint, I'll show you the thumb. And what it means is that there are truly an actual roadmap, a path of I am this way because I experienced this. And if I can touch on what you said about your mom, she's an amazing mother, and you have this great relationship. But sure, one of your outcomes was that I'm going to be a perfectionist. I'm going to strive to achieve. I'm going to be a winner, right? And those are great things. It's not that they're negative things, but you've got to recognize, why is that such a drive in me? And then when you go look back, wow, yeah, that's when I felt the most love. That's when I felt, not that your mother was doing anything in a deficit, just that that's what you felt from that, was when I get her approval and I get her love and I'm winning, I feel so whole. So then there's those parts of you, these parts inside of you that say, oh, well, we got to keep winning. We got to keep doing. We got to keep going, so that you can feel that same feeling. So that's when some of that recognition is so powerful to understand who we are, because when we have the why, you're exactly right. We grasp onto that and we have an understanding and we feel like it's like a platform to continue to level up in life. It's a platform to continue to grow when we have an idea of where we're starting from. And so whether you use an Enneagram like you're talking about, there's also attachment style assessments and studies that show you the same type of thing. Like you answer these certain questions and maybe you're an anxious attachment or you're an avoidant attachment. There's a multitude of different ways that you can look at it, but it's the same thing. It's the idea of, I am who I am because of the life experiences I had. And some were probably amazing, but some of them could have been wrought with trauma or a lot of abuse, or maybe parents that were neglectful, or maybe parents that were so amazing and thought they were doing a great job, but they brought in their own multi-generational trauma to it. They brought their own baggage of what their parents taught them, what they thought was right. Most parents show up wanting to love and be amazing, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a childhood we have to heal from, so that then we can be an adult that is thriving and really operating in a place of having everything we want in life and being able to love and be loved in a very emotionally healthy way.
Yeah, I think that can build a lot of resentment when you're not realizing, like what you just said was so great. When you said that wasn't your mother's fault, that's what you felt from that. And I think that is so eye-opening that you're like, for years and years, I would fight it out with my mom and be like, why do you want? And she's like, I don't want that from you. What do you mean? And it's interesting that sometimes it's us.
We make up stories.
Yeah, we make up stories about what's really happening.
Yeah.
Well, the story in our head can rule all for us, It's the story
That's
we
so
decide. True. The story in our head about ourselves, the story in our head about someone else. I mean, if you apply this relationally in any way, you talk about your connection anyway, you're thinking about maybe your friendships, and you think, why did my friend do that? Why aren't they giving me what I need? Or why did they say that or act that way? It's so much of the time, if we stop and give ourselves a little bit of reflection, we might recognize, you know what? This is really about me. It's not about what they're doing. It's about the way I'm perceiving it, the way I'm recognizing it, the way it is triggering me in some way. And we hear that word tossed around all the time these days, triggers. But it's not that they're triggered me and it's their fault. It's that it triggered me and I need to recognize, what do I need to do in this space to process those feelings in a healthy way. And so I think it all is connected, and the understanding that we have so much power. We have so much power. Why are we giving it away? Why are we not using it and harnessing it in a way to live our life to where we feel like we're happy, we're emotionally healthy, and we're happy, and we're giving that energy to other people.
That's so true.
So that's so much of what people come for. People will come to therapy, or they come for coaching, because there is a difference, and I do both. But they come because they're saying, I feel stuck. I don't know why, but I feel stuck. I either repeat the same relationship with a different person over and over again. I experience the same problem, so I must be the common denominator. Or I'm suffering from a horrible breakup and I don't know why I feel so bonded with this person. And I can't let go. Or I have conflict with my parents and I don't know why, or I can't get along with my sister, or I have friends that come in and out of my life and I can't maintain healthy friendships. All those things are clues. Those are clues that there's something you need to work on. There's some work to do here, because usually you're getting in your own way, Well,
I was going to say, when you do have people like that say, I'm stuck and the common denominator must be me. And I feel like, especially people who kind of live under shame, that I would think that they're coming into this and they're thinking, so shame me, tell me what I did wrong. Often, and obviously there are pits that we throw ourselves into because of our own merit and all of these things. But I mean, do you find that it's usually because I know a lot of people will shy away from therapy because they don't want to feel weak or they don't want to feel like everything's their fault.
Yeah.
How do you see that showing up in your practice? I mean, I know obviously you got to address things that people are doing that are holding themselves back, but how can people who don't want to feel like, you know, the shameful victim, I mean, are there things in their past that they can work through? They get like, how do you get to a place where you want to work on yourself?
Yes.
When
I mean,
you don't want to feel like the problem, you know what I mean?
Right. And doing the work is scary. It's scary for a lot of people. And when you talk about emotional work, especially for people who emotions are a little bit scary, maybe vulnerability is a frightening thought, then coming to therapy isn't really on their radar. But the thing is that it shouldn't have this stigma. It shouldn't have this shame, because to me, it's no different than leveling up in any other way. You know, if we feel like we're not our best physical self, we're going to pay attention to what we're putting into our body. We're going to pay attention to how we're working our muscles in our body. We're going to care about that. But if we feel like we're emotionally not healthy, why don't people want to do that work as well? It's not any fun in the beginning if you're starting a program to suddenly level up your wellness and your health, but your results are amazing. You know, so people want to do that. It's the same thing with therapy. It may not feel a lot of fun. You think, oh, I might cry. I might touch into things that are painful, some memories I've repressed. I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. But if you do go there, it's only temporary. And what you get from that is almost like an awakening. It's the ability to finally, I get myself. I understand what I was doing. I understand why this relationship didn't work out. I understand why I'm attracted to that person instead of this person. You know, I want to be healthy. I want to thrive. And so I view it as a really positive thing. And I view it as no different than anything else we do for ourselves in our life. You know, you go see a doctor if something isn't feeling good, but emotionally, if you're not feeling well, we're just supposed to grin and bear it. That's, you know, that doesn't even make sense. So I think that the stigma, I think, is changing. I do believe that more recent years, people understand that emotional health is important. And I think that the advent of social media and access and awareness is really helpful, because a lot of people who thought of it in a really negative light now may view it differently.
Yeah. Well, so Lauren and I are both actually super obsessed with health and wellness and all things health and wellness. But I keep seeing over and over again how the trauma that people have had in their lives are actually physically
manifesting,
whether it turns into cancer, you know, major anxiety issues, autoimmune conditions, whatever. So how do you kind of dive into those? And I know you do. I saw EMDR and things like that. So
for sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. You know, trauma is stored in the body. There's a very famous book by a doctor called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's a book that really dives into that. I recommend that to anybody that wants to really research or understand how that shows up. But it does that, you know, our body remembers things that our mind represses. And our body tries to protect us from things. And sometimes if we are in an environment that is so sick, we can't heal in that environment that makes us sick. So our body can manifest and show and present in ways that illustrate, just like we know there's a common knowledge that if you have too much stress, it could affect your heart, right? I mean, I feel like we know that. You can go to a regular, you know, your physician would tell you you have a too high stress life. That's not going to be healthy for you. But that's where it usually stops. Hasn't been up until recent years the next step that says, okay, but not only is it bad for you, it can actually make you sick. And there's a lot of modalities that you can do in therapy, like EMDR, that accesses traumatic memories and helps you rewrite a narrative to look at them and feel them differently. There's somatic therapy, which uses a lot of body work, a lot of breath work, a lot of shaking, a lot of things that release stored energy in your body. There's polyvagal theory. There's so many different things and ways that you can access. Usually it has to do with a trauma that the body has held on to. And our amazing, brilliant minds have learned how to shove down deep, so we almost forget them. It's that protective part, right? It doesn't feel good to remember something really painful or abusive or traumatic. So our brain, the way these neural pathways work, we're going to forget about it. We're going to have it deep down. We're going to move on. We're going to push ahead. But our body sits right there with it every day. So the mind-body connection is so powerful and so amazing. And if you go into therapy and you do some work and you have some trauma, you know, your therapist is going to be able to say to you, hey, maybe we need to go this route. And if, most therapists, I think, have a lot of trauma-informed work and can do that. But if not, you can specifically find someone that does EMDR. You can find somebody that focuses on polyvagal theory. You can find someone that really does a lot of breath work. Learning how to do breath work, learning how to be able to tap into the natural dopamine that you have stored in your body, learning how to use what you have, this amazing gift we were given, in a way that's healthy for you, that's a way that furthers you, that lets you level up, lets you grow, and lets you continue to on the quest to, figure out who we want to be. I feel like we have this endless opportunity, and not many of us really tap into it.
Yeah. I'm doing a polyvagal, it's a brain rewiring course right now because of I've been going to this naturopathic doctor and trying to get to the bottom of why I have been sick for 2 years. And he suspects there's mold toxicity. But he said, we got off of a 2-hour conversation of him Sherlock Holmesing all my systems with my symptoms with all my tests and everything. And he said, what I would recommend today is to get on that brain rewiring program. And he said that is going to be the biggest key to you getting well physically. And I think when I started that program, what I had heard said, which was so wonderful, is she said, talking about like the body keeps the score and physical manifestation pain of trauma, is she said, if you've thought through it and you didn't feel through it, it'll be stuck there as pain.
That's
and
right.
I think that's interesting that when we think of therapy, a lot of people will think, and I'll use Alex as an example because she's not a feeler. She doesn't like to be vulnerable. And we don't want to feel, right? And I think we're scared that if we do feel, what's going to happen? And then am I going to have to own something? Am I going to have to take accountability for something? It's going to be so uncomfortable physically for me and mentally, emotionally.
Right.
How do you help people get past that? Because I would imagine if you can't get to a place where you can feel it, you can't heal past it.
For sure. I mean, let me invite you to a new perspective here. And that perspective is we have to feel to heal. It's really that simple. Because exactly what you're talking about. And if you feel like vulnerability is not your jam, there's a reason for that. It didn't feel safe for you. Yeah. It doesn't feel safe for you to be vulnerable. And so emotional safety is probably something that you crave in your life desperately. And you may not recognize how it shows up. Some people crave emotional safety so much that they need to have everything neat and clean in their house because the order and chaos makes them feel safe. And they don't recognize that connection can 100% have to do with your desire for emotional safety. And being vulnerable and talking about it doesn't feel like that's going to get you there. But in fact, if you do address that, you do a little bit of a deep dive to figure out who you are and why you are so afraid of vulnerability, you would actually probably get to a place of healing from that, from your body and your mind together, because it is so connected. We also need to look at what is trauma when we're thinking about that, because trauma, in my definition, and everybody kind of has their own, but the way I look at it is that trauma is anything that exceeds your body's ability to cope at that time. So little T trauma and big T trauma. Big T is, abuse, things that we know would be big T trauma. But little T trauma can be a child who's on a playground who wanted to play and nobody would play with them. And they felt like they didn't belong. They felt not worthy. And they have carried that with them as an adult their whole life. That's little T trauma. And we don't look at it in that way, but it exceeded that child's ability to cope. It shaped that child and how they looked at themselves and how they interacted and connected with other people. And it basically emotionally stunted them. That is a form of trauma that we can heal from. That we go back and recognize, where did this start? Where did these feelings start? When did you feel a lack of connection? When did you feel like you didn't belong? When have you recognized that your instant trigger and your go-to response in conflict has to do with, I'm not worthy. I don't belong. They don't want me. I'm not a priority. Okay, but where did that start? Where was that first memory of when you felt like you didn't belong? When was the first memory that you weren't a priority? And then you heal from that. You heal from that. We revisit it. We talk about it. We feel it. We process it. We validate it. We reframe it. We write new narratives for it so that now we can look at it differently. And then the next time you're in that conflict, instead of immediate escalation and everyone gets emotionally dysregulated and out of control, you're able to say, wait a minute, hold on. my go-to is this, but I don't want to go there. I actually can recognize this is about you and me in the here and now. And what I'm feeling is this. And you're able to have that control and power over your emotions, which feels amazing. And then you're not so scared of them. Then you become not so fearful of vulnerability because now it's safe to do that. Nothing bad happens now when you get in touch with those feelings. And you've told those parts of yourself, I'm good. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Does that give you an example of what
absolutely.
you're talking about? Okay,
Yes,
good.
thank you, Lauren, for throwing my vulnerability.
Well, oh my God. I feel like we want to add up the
But
trauma
you know what?
here. I win. Okay.
But first of all, we can't compare trauma. We can't minimize it. We can't judge it. Everybody has their own stuff. And it's almost silly to think that anybody can walk around without having something that's affected them. That's just not real life. You know, you could even describe to me a leave it to beaver picket fence life growing up. And I'm going to tell you, there's something that didn't feel good. There's something that affected you. Even with the most awesome thing that the picture we paint looks beautiful, there's something underneath there in that paint, you know? And I think that it's such a sad thing for me if I see someone who is not living a great life. They're stuck. They don't feel good. They don't feel happy. They're not thriving. That they're in repetitive relationships that are failing. Their friendships come and go. That they can't do well professionally. They're not doing well as a parent. Their children are suffering, and they don't want to look within, because that's where all the answers are. All the answers are here for each of us, for all of us, and that's unequivocal to me. So I think that the journey of doing some emotional work is so rewarding.
Well, I know a lot of our listeners would be interested. This is a little bit of a pivot, but I know when it comes to like our relationships with our spouse, or especially when it comes to our relationships with our kids, we're told, pick your battles. We're always told, pick your battles, pick your battles, pick your battles. But then when it comes to your spouse, how do we pick our battles?
Well, and I was going to touch on that when we were talking about this before too, is that, and I'll say, and because we'll go back to the Enneagram because that's how we know how to see that. But, you know, we both have very similar husbands in the way that they're not combative. They don't like
they're non-confrontational to a fault.
To where they could even be seen as, and we've said this to them before and they hate this, but like laziness, they withdraw, they, you know, and it's when you have an issue, and which I will say is somebody who was in a loop of being in tumultuous, bad relationships for a while. You know, what I will say about like my relationship with my husband, and I will speak for you, but with yours, we have very harmonious, great, non-fighting, non-tumultuous relationships. But I think that what is hard is when you do want to address something. And like you were saying, and maybe this will go back and you can talk about this. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but maybe it's the thought of, oh my gosh, when I addressed something with this other person who would have been abusive or whatever would have happened. This is what happened. But to me, I know logically, if I address anything with my husband, there is not going to be a fallout. I know there's not. However, I hold things back just because I'm like, I know he doesn't want to talk about things and I don't want to talk about things, even just being open about certain things. Like, what is that we're, you know, the spouse relationship, even when it's a healthy one, the communication can be.
I think I'm the opposite. I spout everything off, and sometimes he's like,
right.
Well, it takes all kinds in a relationship for sure, and we all bring our stuff into it. So to kind of touch on what you're saying, you know, when somebody maybe feels as though they're criticized, and even if you're not criticizing, maybe if you're just pointing out something in a beautiful, healthy way that you said it, if that person has feelings about criticism, let's say they had a parent that they felt criticized by, or let's say they felt like they were never doing enough. Maybe their parents were awesome, but they have felt this internal feeling of I don't do enough. Then something that could be perceived inaccurately, perhaps, but perceived as criticism causes an emotional shutdown, causes I'm turning it off. That doesn't feel safe to me. I don't like the way that feels, and I'm done. And even though that wasn't actually what happened. So that work will be to recognize, okay, let's process that criticism. Let's process that go-to feeling for you, that go-to, I call it your go-to response. What is your automatic response system that here you're not thinking of? It's not a cognitive thought. It's not I'm choosing to do this. It's just what happens in our nervous system automatically. It's those protective parts again I mentioned. It's those parts that remember, the body that's remembering, oh, that feeling feels like this. I'm not going there. And, that's one aspect. Another path that we can take with what you're saying is rules for fighting fair. People have to learn how to fight fair. We're not taught that. Nobody teaches us that anywhere. And, some of the rules for fighting fair have to do with these principles, about, silent treatment, stonewalling. Do we shut off in a way that we don't actually have effective communication? Do we have contempt for our partner? Do we lose it when we're so angry that we say things we don't mean? So that's another path you take when you learn how to work with your spouse in a healthy way, of learning the rules for fighting fair, learning how to communicate with telling you how I feel, not this is your problem, but I feel like this is occurring. So there's a whole path of also communication skills that we go down, of learning how to show up in that way to have conversations that are effective and actually move the needle to feel like you're furthering your connection, because that would really be the idea, right? That we can have a conflict. I can tell you how I'm feeling. You're going to learn how to validate my feelings, so I know that you're here with me. You're in the pool with me and we're connecting in this moment. And then you can hear me and you can process that. Maybe you say, whoa, I'm feeling a little bit dysregulated. I need a minute. I'm going to go take a break. Then we're going to come back and talk again. And sometimes people need that. Sometimes people get flooded with emotion, and that's scary. And so rather than escalate and feel out of control, they withdraw. And so that's a learning skill too. How do we recognize that in our body? How do we learn how to do a body scan of knowing how we're feeling so that we can show up for the conversation? We can be emotionally present. We can provide the validation. We can provide the reassurance if necessary. And we can also take that information and say, yeah, I want to be better. I want to be better for my spouse. And so all those are just skills. And if people would look at them as simple as, we learn skills to do everything else. If you want to learn how to use your computer, you're going to take an Excel class if you want to do a spreadsheet. But when it comes to relationships, we have no skills. We just dive in. We just dive in and feel like we love the person. But it takes skills to learn how to do that. And it's same with parenting too. We want to be great parents.
So do you think people should be coming in even when things are really, really good, so that they can work on their communication skills rather than when things are going kind of south?
Absolutely. I offer a workshop that's to do before I do for people before you actually even get in a relationship or get married. I also deal with people that say, yeah, we're so happy, but we want to stay happy. And you know what? There was a year ago we weren't real happy. I'm not really sure how we got past it, but we did. But I'm scared we're going to go there again someday. And I want to be ready. And so being ready looks like, great, let's talk about how you fight. How do you fight? And what do you do when you fight? Right. Does one of you, as you stated, hit the other person with words saying, I want to talk about it. I want to feel it. Let's figure it out right now. Let's get to the heart of it. And the other person's like, whoa, I'm out. I can't do that. That's, you can also look at attachment. Is someone avoidant and someone is anxious? You're anxious to feel the reassurance and the love, and you want everything to be okay. And the other person is avoidant because this is not safe. And you want to both be secure. You want to both have the connection and the secure attachment where you can work through your problems in that healthy way. But again, those are skills that we're just not taught. And you have to do that work to learn it. I have people that come in that are in a great place. They're not in a bad spot, but they come in to say, hey, I want to come see you just a few times to feel like we're on a good path. And then what's great is that you've established a relationship. You have a history with somebody. You work through some things. You go over some past conflicts. You learn new ways to cope, new ways to address things. And then 6 months down the road, if life throws you a curveball, you're able to come back in and go, hey, wait, we need to refresh that. We're not doing great on this. And so I think it's so effective to have a champion in your corner. And that's what I try to be for my client base, is a champion to help you really work through these things. And so you feel like you've got somebody on your team rooting for you.
I think that's awesome. Because I will say, I think in my relationship, and the thing that keeps coming up is, how do I get my partner to, like, because he just thinks everything's great. We handle things great. We don't really fight. He also travels 8 months out of the year, and I'm here with my kids and all the things and work and all of the stuff. And then I'll have a meltdown and I'll just be like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. Everything's this, everything. Care about me, when he's like, I've been caring about you. What do you, and he doesn't know how to fix it. But also, we're the ones that are like, let's learn about ourselves. Let's learn how to react. And they're like, I got other things going on, right? It's not that they're mean. They just are not interested in learning about it. So how do you is it just getting them to say, sure, I'll go to therapy. We'll talk about our styles and all this stuff. How do you get them like interested?
I think that's a huge thing, is being able to maybe say, sure, let's go try this out. But I think we also have to hold space for our partner and recognize that they may not always be interested in the way we are. And that's okay. If you learn the skills on your own and you're able to say, hey, babe, last week when we got into that big fight about whatever, I recognized that my go-to was doing this. And you know what I learned when I do that? It's because of this. That was so enlightening for me, babe. Isn't that awesome? And so, honey, when you do this, I wonder if that's because of something. Let's figure that out together. There's I think ways that you can address that. And you can also say, look, I want us to thrive. I want us to be this couple that can get through anything together. And I'm learning that when I'm vulnerable with you and you're vulnerable with me, I'm learning when I figure out why I'm the way I am and you figure out why the way you are, that we now come together in a much better place. We can hold space for each other and we can meet each other for where we are, because two people are not ever really at the same place at the same time, right? You're doing great. He's not. He's doing great. You're not. That's just life. And so when we can learn how to meet each other, and if you were feeling very overwhelmed and stressed and he had some skills where he could say, oh, honey, I'm so glad you told me. How can I make this better for you? How can I give you some reassurance and some comfort? What do you need from me? How can I show up for you? You would probably just be so unbelievably happy if you learned that. And so it doesn't have to be, we're going to deep dive always into all the trauma and all the headless down. Sometimes it's, you know what? I think I'm doing okay. I just need a little bit of a little bit of coaching, a little bit of a guidance, a little bit of knowledge so that I can apply it to my specific relationship. And I think that's something that we underestimate too, how powerful that is,
Yes. And I think I want to touch on that a little bit. I know that you have experience with this because I know your husband has been sober for years now,
yes,
right?
15 years today, actually. Today is his sobriety anniversary, 15 years.
Oh, today?
Amazing.
Today. Actually,
Awesome. So I love that. So I stopped drinking in February of this year and I don't have any intention of drinking again. And it was very different for me. I've dealt with people with addiction and things like that. It was more getting my health in order. I was like, why am I putting any kind of toxin in my body? I got to stop this. I listened to the Andrew Huberman podcast about what alcohol does to you. And I was just like, you know what? I'm out.
Right.
Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And since then, I listened to Dr. Alan Carr's book about just stopping drinking. And I listened to all this stuff, getting all this information. And it's been, what is it, like 6 months or so now? And it's interesting that even though I would have never said I was an addict or an alcoholic or anything like that, every milestone that happens now that I'm not drinking when I would have been drinking before, I can see now and take ownership of, oh my gosh, my behavior is so different in that moment. Even if I had a glass of wine or something, than it would be now not drinking. And I think to your point, when I think about addiction and there's a lot of verbiage that a lot of people relate to and other people don't. But I think that once you've got some time away from something that you are addicted to, it's really not easy, but it feels more comfortable to go, you know what? When I told this person this back in October because I had a couple glasses of wine, that's not who I am. I don't like that I did that. I'm going to call them and I'm going to take ownership and I'm going to say, I'm sorry that I said that. That was crazy. And it's interesting because when you're saying in these other relationships, if you can be the one that knows the tools and you can take ownership, I think that's really hard for us to do when we're not thrown into a program or something that says you need to be the one. I remember when a family member was dealing with addiction and the wife was going to Al-Anon and she was so pissed because she was like, this isn't my addiction. I don't want to have to do the work with this. I don't want to have to. And stepping away from drinking for me, I kind of felt that same way of being like, I didn't think I was addicted. And I think there's a big stigma around that word because I think we can be addicted to sugar and addicted to purchasing things and lots of different things. Yeah, our phones, dopamine hits from social media, all these different things.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I stepped away from that I could go, whoo, I am not the same person. I'm not authentically me doing that. And maybe talk a little bit about that, but also, you know, how can we know that and take ownership over that anyway, just in our relationships anyway, when we're talking to people, knowing, like you're saying, hold on, I know why I'm doing this. That's not who I am. How can we do that without like the fear, you know, that now it's on us, you know, and it's somebody else's issue and we're having to deal with it.
But I don't view it that it's someone else's issue and we're having to view it. I view it as that we interact with people all day, every day. How we interact, that is our issue. Now, I can't control what somebody else does. And I'm a firm believer of you let them do whatever they're going to do. If somebody's going to be, you know, a certain way that you don't subscribe to, that's fine. Let them do their thing. That's their thing. I'm only responsible how I show up. I'm only responsible for myself, my own power, my own behaviors, my own actions. You know, we have to look at knowing that all we're responsible for is how we show up. All that we can do is us. All that we can recognize that we can control or have power over us. And when we start caring about how that other person is doing, what they're doing, why they are the way they are, and we make it all about that whole interaction, then we're giving our power away. Why would we do that? Our power lies in, I know who I am. I know the person I want to be. I know the tenets and the foundations that are important to me that have really given me and shaped me into the person I am. And I'm not going to interact with anybody that drains me emotionally, that takes away from my life in some negative way. I'm not going to give away my power in that way and worry about somebody that I see maybe, wow, this is unhealthy. If it's unhealthy, I'm out. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. And so I think that we spend a lot of time as people, we spend this time looking so much at other people and what they're doing to us and how dare they've done that. And they, you know, I'm so shocked at their behavior. Okay, but let them have their behavior. That's fine. My behavior is that's not for me. And when you can learn how to start shaping your life for you, surrounding, you know, putting people in your life that add to it and don't subtract from it, putting people that don't drain you emotionally, people that are also on a quest of being the best version of themselves, people who want to level up, who have this growth mindset, they want to be healthy, that they want to be emotionally, physically, in all the ways healthy, then it changes. We suddenly look around and we see, wow, we've got a support system we never had. Wow, all these toxic ideas of jealousy and people being in your business in a negative way, well, that's gone. And so I think so much of what you're saying alleviates itself when we learn how to recognize that all we need to worry about is right here, is us. And I think that's a lesson you teach to your children. You know, I think children don't get enough of that either. And they don't know how to do that at all. And they're looking to us to be the leaders. And when you can actually have that validation with your child, when your child comes home from school and so-and-so was mean to me, or I can't believe that happened, and you're able to actually sit down with them and say, gosh, you know, tell me about that. That must have been so frustrating to you. That must have felt this way. I want to know what you're feeling. And you validate their feelings and you have that connection and you're curious. The number one thing there is curiosity about how they're feeling. Then you're teaching them to recognize, okay, I know who I am. And you're asking, who are you? Why did that hurt you? What did that feel like? You know, and they're telling you, I felt alone. Okay, but are you alone? No, I'm not alone. I've got all these people that love me in my life. Okay, well, it must have been they might be having a bad day. They may not have something going on that you don't know about. So it wasn't about you, honey. It's about them. And then you can teach your child the same thing, is that the other people's stuff is about them, you know? We're only responsible for us. And if we work on our health and our happiness, then we're going to attract people in our life that also have that emotional health and that emotional happiness. And then our life will be one that we look around and we feel, gosh, we don't have any crap anymore. How great that is. And to me, that's totally our responsibility to frame that and to set that up. Absolutely. So so you mentioned this earlier, is that, you know, there are things that people do when they do have friends come in and out of their life or things like that. But on the other side of the spectrum, how would you, if you're realizing and you're leveling up and you're being introspective and you're realizing maybe I do have people around me that maybe I give them
too much of myself, or maybe I give them, a space in my life that they don't really have. I thought we were better friends. I thought we were like family. And we're not. It's showing up that we're not. How do we heal that if we think we can, or
well, for sure.
How do we step away from that?
Friendships are hard. It's hard and it hurts. And I mean, I can even give you some disclosure here that I personally had to experience the grief of a friendship not too long ago. I'm 51, about to be 52 years old. And that was really hard for me. And it doesn't get any easier. And the thing is that, we want to have grace for people, and you want to have grace for somebody you love. If your friend is not being their best self, you want to have grace and you want to try to be a support system. But there has to be a fine line where you recognize, now this is hurting me. And now this is causing me a deficit in my life. This is affecting me in a really negative way. And maybe I'm feeling a lot of guilt and a lot of, I can't give them what they need. And I feel like I'm doing a lot of work, and I'm now hyper focused on them instead of hyper focused on where I need to be in my life. That's when you might have to take a look at that. And I think that friendships also can come and go for different reasons. We can say that we love someone and want only the best for them. And maybe I'm just a little busier now and I don't have time to invest in that way. And there doesn't have to be this dramatic thing. It can just be more that we're in different places in our life. And I love you and I want all for you. But I've also got to love myself and want all for me. And this is dragging me down. I think that's okay to do that, but it is hard. I don't want to minimize the pain of that, because sometimes we have to grieve the loss of a friendship like we would grieve the death in some way, go through those stages of grief, and it is painful. But if we surround ourselves with people that don't make us feel good, if we really end up feeling bad all the time when around someone, there's no reason to have that in our lives. We only get one life to live. And we have to make sure it's one that we're living to our fullest. And if somebody is dragging us down, if they don't show up for us in any way, they're not there for us, they don't provide us that level of support or interest, they don't champion our successes, they don't celebrate us. If there's a lot of envy or shame or belittling or negativity, that's not healthy. It's not healthy for you. And frankly, you're not even doing them any favors by being in that, because you're just both stuck in this pattern where you're not going to be able to change someone else, because change comes from within, and you're not going to be able to fix it. And wanting to fix it is not where you want to be anyway, because we can only really fix ourselves. And, I don't come from this lens of that we're broken, but I certainly believe that we can have things that hold us back, and we got to work on our own stuff, and somebody else has got to work on their own stuff. And if they don't want to, you got to let them be. That's their choice of where they want to be in life. And, it can be a grief-stricken moment, but I think we can do it with love. And I feel all the love in the world for a friendship that I had to fade away from, but I know that it's not healthy for me. And that's kind of where you have to sit with that. And it's hard. It's difficult. It's one of the more difficult things, I think, in life, friendships. Because women especially, and I'll speak from that standpoint, being a woman, we give our all. We will throw everything into that friendship, and we have to make sure it's one that's mutually beneficial for us, that we feel like we have that same effort and interest and love and connection back.
Yeah, because my mom and I both were discussing this recently, because I think we both kind of experienced this a lot, especially when we were new to a town and trying to get to know people and try to build friendships. There was a lot of, we were the inviters. We were constantly asking people to get together, trying to build that friendship. And people would come and meet us and we'd have a blast, but then it was never reciprocated. So it was like, I felt like I was giving, and there was like never anything in return. So there's a certain point where it's like, why am I bothering with this?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
For sure.
So in a situation like that, what do you recommend?
Well, I think that we want to have people that are making us feel the way we're trying to make them feel. And I wonder if the people you were trying to connect with weren't your people. That would be my very first question is, are they your people? Were there people that you really, did you have a connection that was real? Was it authentic? Or was it just this casual thing, And again, I go back to letting people be who they are. Maybe they didn't have room for a new friend in their life. Maybe they didn't feel the connection with you. Maybe they need more time to look at a new friendship. But regardless of the reasons, I wouldn't look at that and say it has anything to do with me. I would say that just wasn't my people. I'm going to meet somebody else. I'm going to move on and meet somebody else where I can have that connection. Yeah. I'm not going to ever put myself in a position where I feel like I'm not going to thrive because I'm trying harder than somebody else is. For what purpose? You know, what's that going to give you?
Right.
And when you think about things that hurt us, and you think about people that hurt us, and women, especially in friendships that hurt us, I think it's always important to remember that hurt people hurt others. And so if someone is hurting you, they're dealing with their own stuff, because that's where that originates from. That's where it comes from. So if people are showing up in a way that's hurting you in a relationship and you don't feel like it's healthy, that's just not one you're not going to be able to fix that, because that's their own pain. That's their own stuff. And that's when you gracefully have to say, I love you, but it's not for me. Let me ask you this. I mean, do you think it's us needing to heal? Because I have the tendency to always, and my husband will tell me, like, Lauren, nobody, when the old saying, when people say, like, nobody thinks about you as much as you think about you, like, it's not that big, but I'll be like, is she mad at me? Did I do something? Did I say something? And he's always like, your first instinct is always you did something. Maybe they just flaked, or maybe they just, like, why do you always go? So do you think that is in me? I've got some stuff that I need to heal.
She's like, yes.
Yes, my love, I do.
Because you've always been so good at that. You have always been so good at, like, why does that have anything to, I mean, even before you got your master's in this, you've always been like, it's not my issue.
It's not
to
you,
take
it's
on.
Theirs.
And I always,
their stuff. It's their stuff.
Yeah. And I have had friends in 15-year marriages who they get into a fight and their husband is, like, harboring, and they're like, whatever, it's over for me. I'm going to live my life, and I'm just like, I would die to be like that. So I guess what I'm learning now is I've got a lot of work to do.
But everybody does. Everybody can use some work. You're not alone. Yeah. We all can. But sure, if you see, wow, I'm hypervigilant about relationships, and when I'm worried I'm hurting someone, I'm hypervigilant to the point that I am spiraling, almost thinking, what did I do? How can I fix it? What could I have done different? That's a cue. That's letting you know, okay, I probably need to figure that out, because why would you spend that much energy? And if somebody is truly being authentic, then they're going to say, Lauren, that hurt me. Lauren, when you said that, I didn't like that. So this is what happened. That's a healthy friendship. And then you're able to say, thank you for telling me. I'm so glad I didn't recognize that. And you're able to grow in that together. But if someone's just icing you out, or someone's acting a certain way, that's them. That's on them. We have to be accountable from the standpoint and the lens of, am I being a healthy person? Am I kind? Am I courteous? Am I respectful? Sure. But if you check all those boxes and you know that you are functioning in a way that is healthy, but there's still always that other thing, then that's when you've got to recognize, okay, either I'm being too overly worried and I need to do some work on me, or that person's got their own stuff and their own story, and that's not mine. And the difference between those two lies in you recognizing your own behaviors, But I think that if we all would focus on ourselves first and get ourselves in a place of emotional health, then we would see everything else a lot more clearly.
Well, thanks, Jenn.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
I'm so glad
I have such a different perspective now. I feel lighter.
Good. Yay. I'm really glad I got to be a part of this today. And I love you guys' message and what you're doing. And I listen to your episodes, and it's really fun. And I love it. So I'm so glad I got to be a part of it. And I appreciate you inviting me to be here. And let's please stay in touch and grow together on this journey we're all on.
Absolutely.
You're welcome on any time. In fact, we want you to come back on to talk a little bit about your sex.
Hey.
Yeah, we do. We want to talk about intimacy.
That is
my
favorite topic. So bring it on. And, if anybody wants to find me or follow me, I'm sure you'll put up those handles and all that, right? Because I'm certainly available and want to.
Actually, just go ahead and let us know. Let everybody know where they can connect with you, whether they're in town, out of town. Maybe talk about.
Right. My practice here in Houston is Pinkerton Psychotherapy. And that's easy to find on our website. It's pinkertonpsychotherapy.com. For me personally, it's jennpinkerton.com. And I do a lot of coaching, a lot of speaking through jennpinkerton.com. My handles are either my name, Jenn Pinkerton, or Redhead Reveal, which is what my own podcast is, and which is what I write from with my blog and my published work. So anyway, thank you so much for letting me on, and I appreciate it. You guys have a great day.
We'll see you next time.
Okay,
you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of That's Wild, the podcast with Lauren and Alex. I am so excited to keep on going with this podcast because it's like our weekly girls' night in, and you're invited to the most fun-filled chat about the wildest stuff happening out there. Think of us as your BFFs who spill the tea on all the crazy things you didn't even know you needed to know. And just like the awesome friend you just heard from, we've got a lineup of fabulous guests waiting to dish out the juiciest stories and the coolest, inspiring information. We just want to leave you inspired, motivated, or simply mind blown by something that'll have you texting your friends like, did you know this? Now, here's the deal, lovely listeners. We want to hear from you too. So grab your phones, slide into our voicemail with your thoughts, questions, or even your own wild stories. And if you've been having as much fun as we are, why not share the love? A 5-star review is like the best virtual high five we could ask for. Don't forget to hit that follow button so you never miss out on our weekly girls' night. You know, you don't want to miss it. Thanks for joining us today, friends. Until next time, keep it fun, keep it fabulous, and keep the good vibes flowing with That's Wild, the podcast.